Welcome to this episode of Q&A with Liturgy Man. I'm Taylor Burton-Edwards, Liturgy Man with Discipleship Ministries of the United Methodist Church. I'm your apportionment dollars at work to help you strengthen worship and the understanding of worship where you are. Today's question comes to us from Fernando Cesar of Brazil, who left his question on the Liturgy Man blog right here. And he wonders why Methodists tend to kneel when receiving Holy Communion. It's a great question, and we actually have a somewhat interesting history in that regard. A history that goes back to before the time of Methodism and into early Methodism itself. It's a history of rubrics. It's also a history of ecumenical scholarship. Let's talk about the rubrics, and then we'll talk about the ecumenical scholarship. The rubrics. This is the Book of Common Prayer, 1662, from the Church of England. It's the source that John Wesley took his 1784 Sunday service from. We'll look at that in a moment. At the place which describes the serving of the elements to those who are receiving, this is the language from the 1662 Book of Common Prayer. Then shall the minister first receive the communion in both kinds, and then proceed to deliver the same to the bishops, priests, and deacons in like manner, if any be present, and after that to the people also in order, into their hands, all meekly kneeling. So it's very clear from the 1662 prayer book that the intention was that everybody is kneeling to receive the elements of Holy Communion. Same place in John Wesley's edition, however, we see this. Then shall the minister first receive the communion in both kinds, and then proceed to deliver the same to the other ministers in like manner, if any be present, and after that to the people also in order, into their hands. No mention of kneeling. It's likely that many Methodists were kneeling, but there's not a requirement made for kneeling here. It may be that John Wesley, who was himself a bit of an early church scholar, was already anticipating that this kind of kneeling practice might not be the most important thing you need to do to receive communion. There can be a variety of responses to how you received. He made room for that by not specifying kneeling where the Book of Common Prayer actually had. However, Methodists not necessarily being all that comfortable at times with ambiguity, in the 1905 version of the ritual have this rubric. The minister shall then proceed to administer the communion to the people in order, kneeling, into their uncovered hands. So, by 1905, it's very clear, yes, everybody should be kneeling to receive. But then by 1935, it starts to become a little bit less clear again. Now, in the main version of the ritual, Lord's Table, the Lord's Supper, the main text for that in the 35-39 hymnal, we do find this. The minister shall first receive the Holy Communion in both kinds, after which shall proceed to deliver the same to other ministers in like manner, if any be present. After this, the minister shall administer the Holy Communion to the people, while they are devoutly kneeling. This book, however, as along with the 1945 Book of Worship, contains an alternative service called Alternate Service here. It's called Lord's Supper 2 in the 1945 Book of Worship. And in that ritual, everyone is kneeling for the Lord's Prayer at the end of the Great Thanksgiving, but then it says that a hymn may be sung, and the communicants shall be invited at the Lord's table. The minister shall deliver both kinds to the people in their hands. No mention of kneeling. The 1965 Book of Worship rubrics in the same place basically adopt the alternative version from the 1935 as the main version. The minister shall first receive the Holy Communion in both kinds, delivering the same to those who are assisting. Then the minister or those assisting shall deliver the elements in both kinds to the people. No mention of kneeling. And then if you look at our current ritual, it simply says, the bread and wine are given to the people, with these or other words being exchanged. No mention of kneeling. What's happened? In the intervening years, between 1905 and 1935 in particular, but even more markedly since the 60s and into today, what's happened is the result of that ecumenical scholarship I mentioned earlier, which found a clear difference in the way that the early church understood and practiced the sacrament of Holy Communion versus the way that the medieval church had begun to do so. A major shift happens around the 5th or 6th century, where the whole nature of the Great Thanksgiving shifts from being initially a sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving to God, because God has made us worthy to participate in this, to a penitential prayer seeking for God to make us worthy by receiving the body and blood of Christ. Kind of a flip in meaning in a way that had taken place. And so what happens in the 20th century as all of this early church stuff is being rediscovered is that more options are initially being created by Protestant bodies, including Methodists, including here in the 30s and 40s, and then making that the main option really in the 60s. And until it becomes sort of mainstream in many places now around the world for everyone to receive standing and not necessarily kneeling. What do I think we should do? I think we can make our own decision individually and understand our work together in the Great Thanksgiving. The more important shift that happened was that we're no longer all kneeling for the Great Thanksgiving. In fact, we're all standing for that. And then however we need to approach the Lord at that point can be a matter of personal devotional practice. We praise the Lord together and receive the Lord individually. And so if that is better embodied in a practice of kneeling, do that. If it's better embodied in practice of standing, do that. Hope this has been helpful. Remember, you can always contact me, worship@liturgyfolks.com, through the UMC Worship Facebook group, or, like Fernando Cesar, drop a line on this page. Perhaps your question or comment will become the basis for a future episode of Q&A with Liturgy Man. And the peace of Christ be always with you.